The miracle doctor won't be a kept man. Chapter 101. My boy, Helena screamed in terror. Barry, Zenith shouted, dashing over to them. Barry's body gave a violent jerk. He moved his lips, trying to speak, but no sound came out. After repeating this several times, his body slowly went limp before finally becoming stiff. He had died. He had died in his mother's arms just like that. Never had he imagined he would die for real. If he had known, he would have believed Kiran and said his last goodbye to his parents. Helena held her son's stiff corpse motionlessly. She looked as if she was dreaming or as if she had been struck by lightning. Zenith was just as stupefied. Resurrection pill, huh? That sure was some resurrection. Kiran's laughter came from nearby. This turn of events had come like a bolt out of the blue. Everyone directed their gazes to Kiran, their eyes wide with disbelief and dismay. Our resurrection pill? What do you mean? Zenith fought to keep his grief in as he asked. The healing elder gave your son a resurrection pill to stimulate all the potential in his body to the limit. It revived him quickly, but it was like lighting a whole box of matches. He burned bright and vigorous, but went out almost instantly, and then Kiran trailed off and pointed at Barry in their arms. Huh? Zenith and Helena's expressions were fraught with agony as they trembled all over. They had given the elders 60 million not to save their son, but to hasten his death. Basically, they had killed their own son. People used money to buy their survival while they used money to send their son to his death. Anguish and pain engulfed them. They were riveted to the spot. You killed my son. Helena laid Barry down and lunged at Kiran. Bam! Kiran raised his foot and landed a kick right in Helena's stomach. Ah! With a shriek, her body sailed 6 to 7 meters through the air and crashed to the ground. She hunched over like a shrimp, unable to make a sound. Tell Alfred Ziegler that this is just the beginning. From now on, the 3 big families will witness their children die until all of them are dead. Kiran's thundering voice rang out, stunning everyone at the scene. He had declared war on the 3 big families in public. If his declaration yesterday was only known to the elites, this time it was to the common people. His aura was intimidating. His brutality was paralyzing. You'll pay for this. Helena finally managed to even out her breathing and clutched at her lower abdomen, struggling to stand. Zenith quickly helped her up and shot a look at his subordinates. Take Barry's body. We're leaving. He glared at Kiran viciously but did not dare utter a single word. He knew that Kiran would, without a doubt, kill them if he was provoked. Everyone else gawked as Zenith made his departure. Zenith Fableman was the CEO of Zenith Corporation, an extremely powerful company backed by the Ziegler family. Everyone in Bayville Hospital had to treat him with utmost deference whenever they saw him. However, he was nothing but a cowardly chicken before Kiran. Kiran had astonished everyone. Who was he? No one knew. However, they knew that he was a king who dared to challenge the 3 big families. Only when Zenith's family was gone did they register that this was not a dream. Thud. Thump. Some collapsed onto the floor in shock. Collecting himself, Marshall fell to his knees and gazed at Kiran apologetically. I was a fool for not listening to you. Please save my father. Although Kiran's identity was still a mystery to him, judging from Kiran's ability to accurately foresee Barry's death and recognize the elders' unethical methods, he knew that this young man was far more capable than he imagined. Dr. York, Mr. Marshall is a good-hearted man. Adrian tried to intercede for him. The consultation fee will be 100 million or 1 billion. Your choice. Kiran placed his hands behind his back. Chapter 102, 100 million or 1 billion? The onlookers were flabbergasted. Wasn't the answer obvious? Any sane person would choose the former. The latter was 10 times the amount. Marshall's expression grew grave. Just now, in his hurry to save his father, he had overlooked some details. Now that he had calmed down, he could assess the situation. Zenith and Helena were both strong-willed people, but when facing Kiran, the person who had wounded Barry and indirectly caused his death, they did not dare to take revenge on the spot. In contrast, Kiran was very domineering and even declared war on the 3 big families. All of a sudden, he recalled what his wife had told him after she had returned from the 20th anniversary celebration of the 3 big families the previous night. She had spoken of the young master of the York family, Kiran York. Could it be him? Marshall regarded him dubiously. He now understood Kiran's intentions. If he were to side with Kiran, he would only need to pay a consultation fee of 100 million. Otherwise, it would be 1 billion. If he chose the former, they would be bound by friendship. If he chose the latter, they would be bound by a business deal. Beads of sweat appeared on Marshall's forehead as he considered his predicament. The York family used to be the greatest family in Bayville, but that was in the past. Now, Bayville was dominated by 3 big families. Although he had heard from his wife about Kiran's ferocity and had witnessed it firsthand just now, he did not think much would come out of reckless courage. Not gonna choose, huh? Kiran pivoted on his heel. Mr. York, I'll give you 1 billion. Marshall made his choice. Kiran was somewhat crestfallen, but he nodded. Marshall had not misunderstood what his question entailed. Regardless of why the York family had been destroyed, Kiran knew that the family itself was part of the reason. As the saying goes, he who wins the hearts of the people wins the world. Yesterday in the banquet hall, so many people showed respect to the 3 big families. Whether they were sincere or not, there must be a reason they made such a decision. To crush the 3 big families, it was not only necessary to disintegrate them internally, but also to strip them of their affiliated forces. Furthermore, if the York family were to become the greatest family in Bayville again, they would require allies. It was crucial to secure the loyalty of these people. That was exactly why Kiran had presented Marshall with such a question. The result disappointed him. However, he did not blame him, for it was his freedom to choose. In fact, he now had more respect for the Xander family. They had solidified their position in Bayville over 20 years and were absolutely loyal to the York family. Naturally, he thought of Snow. If that girl had not given him trauma, perhaps. Sigh. He had to get that divorce. This concerned his dignity as a man. Pay up, then, Kiran demanded bluntly. Not daring to hesitate, Marshall wrote a check for $1 billion and handed it to Kiran. Kiran accepted it, and at the same time, silver needles appeared in his hand. He made his way over to Mr. Simmons, held up the needles, and inserted them swiftly into his body. Before the others could register his actions, he withdrew the needles, flipped Mr. Simmons over abruptly, and struck him on the back with his palm. Blah! Mr. Simmons spat out a mouthful of foul-smelling black blood, then slowly opened his eyes. Dad, you're awake. Marshall was overjoyed. Mr. Simmons scanned his surroundings and saw that he was in hospital. Well, what happened to me? I don't know either. You started throwing up in your study like you were poisoned, so I rushed you to the hospital, Marshall explained. Mr. Simmons was just as bemused. After thinking for a long time, he searched around on his person and pulled out a book. I was reading this book titled The Secret Records of Dragon's Mount, which I borrowed from Bayville University's Schuyler Library. At some point, my body grew weak, and I passed out. Chapter 103. It was an A book about 2 centimeters thick. There was nothing special about it except for the yellow cover and black characters, so Marshall reached out to take it. Don't touch it. There's poison on it. Kiran swiftly snatched it from him. Huh? Marshall exclaimed. Mr. Simmons was startled. Kiran tossed the book onto the floor, picked up a silver needle, and grabbed Mr. Simmons's hand. Everyone could see clearly now that his fingers had turned black. Kiran pricked the pad of Mr. Simmons's index finger with the silver needle. Black blood oozed out, and his hand returned to its original color. Marshall heaved a sigh of relief and regarded Kiran with immense gratitude. You're fine now? You don't have to stay in the hospital. With that, Kiran picked up the secret records of Dragon's Mount and strode off. However, he was now even more curious, for there was a familiar scent on the book Serena's scent. He was baffled. Marshall and his family stared after him, so amazed they had forgotten to express their thanks. When Kiran arrived back at Marina Breeze Court in a taxi, he saw that the lights were still on in Snow and Margaret's homes. Clearly, they were all waiting for him. He went upstairs and knocked on Margaret's door first. He had only knocked once when Margaret opened the door, her face lighting up when she saw him. You're back. Come on in. Are you tired? She was just like an elderly mother waiting for her son to return, which filled Kiran with a bittersweet sense of nostalgia. He shook his head quickly. Not at all. My friend was sick, so I went to treat him. You should go to bed soon. Hearing his voice, Rain came out of the room in the back. She was wearing cartoon print pajamas, which revealed her white calves, and she looked like an adorable little girl. However, when she saw Kiran, she blushed shyly. Margaret turned to Kiran. "Kiran, there are 2 rooms in this apartment. I'll take one. You and Rain can take the other." Rain flushed furiously and lowered her head. "What are you afraid of? Just tie the knot and have a child soon so I can meet the late Mr. and Mrs. York in heaven without regret," Margaret said, beaming hopefully. Rain felt like she was about to sink through the floor. Troubled, Kiran scratched the back of his head, wondering how he should refuse. Just then, Margaret caught sight of the secret records of Dragon's Mount peeping out of Kiran's jacket pocket and pulled it straight out. "Hey, how come you have this book too? Put it down. There's poison on it." Kiran seized it from her and grabbed her hand. Margaret's hand had already turned black, and Kiran immediately fished out a silver needle to draw out the poison. A horrified Rain rushed over to help. The treatment was over in a flash, and Margaret looked at Kiran. "What's going on?" He shook his head. "I have no idea." "Mom, in the future, don't take Kiran's stuff without permission," Rain scolded her mother. "I didn't mean to. It's just too important." Margaret's expression grew serious. "Important," Kiran repeated quizzically. "Wait here." Margaret turned around and entered the room in the back. When she emerged again, she was holding a similar book wrapped in an unfurled red cloth. But the color of the cloth had obviously faded with time. She approached them, clutching the book as if she were holding a treasure or the entirety of her hope. Her expression was solemn, and her eyes were already moist. Kiran and Rain looked both surprised and grave. When Margaret offered the book to Kiran, he realized in astonishment that it was also titled The Secret Records of Dragon's Mount. "Kiran, it's yours now!" Margaret's cheeks were streaked with tears. Chapter 104. "Is there anything special about this book?" Kiran quizzed. Margaret shook her head. "I don't know, but when the York family was in trouble, Mrs. York gave it to me in a hurry and asked me to keep it. She also told me that if you were no longer alive, I was to burn it and never let anyone else have it." Kiran's brow immediately furrowed deeply when he heard this. The situation must have been tremendously urgent the day the York family was wiped out. If his mother had given this to Margaret at that time, it must be something very important. Not money, gold, or silver, but a book. It was definitely an object of immeasurable value. He took it and studied it carefully from front to back, but there was nothing special, nor was there an interlayer like those secret scriptures in the movies. It was just an ordinary book. He was puzzled. Margaret shook her head too. "I don't know what the use of this book is, but that was what Mrs. York said to me at that time. Why don't you take it and read it? You might be able to find useful information." Kiran was now certain that there was something suspicious about this book, or else it would not have been entrusted for safekeeping. More importantly, the one with poison had obviously been tampered with on purpose, which was extremely strange. Now he was bursting with curiosity about the Schuyler Library, which Onyx had specifically mentioned to him. At the same time, his mind was full of questions about Serena. What were her intentions for getting close to him and even poisoning this copy of the secret records of Dragon's Mount? Suppressing all his doubts, Kiran picked up the book on the floor, put the 2 books together, and turned to Margaret. "Don't worry, I'll figure it out." Margaret nodded. "Well then, you should wash up and go to bed." She cast a glance at Rain and her bedroom. The idea made Rain quiver involuntarily. She had not forgotten that Snow was Kiran's wife. Even if their marriage was a sham, they were still together, weren't they? Where did that leave her? Also, was she really going to share a bed with him when they had just met? That was so embarrassing. Kiran cringed as well. Remembering that Snow was still waiting for him, he offered a hasty smile. "Mom, I have a place of my own. This is your house. I'll go back to mine." "Go back." Margaret was both surprised and disappointed. She tried to persuade him further. "It's too late for you to go out. Besides you and Rain." "Mom." Knowing he was returning to Snow's place, Rain squealed bashfully. "I'll be going now. See you tomorrow." Worried he would be further deterred from leaving, Kiran wheeled around and hurried out of the apartment. Margaret made to go after him but was held back by Rain. Kiran breathed a sigh of relief when Margaret did not follow him outside. He walked over to Snow's unit, opened the door, and let himself in. Kiran looked up and found that Snow had fallen asleep on the couch with documents strewn next to her. Clearly, she had been reviewing documents while waiting for him and had eventually fallen asleep. As Kiran gazed at Snow's curled-up figure on the couch, he felt a swirl of emotions in him. She was a good woman. Thinking of the Xander family's silent persistence touched his heart all of a sudden. Still, Snow had tricked him, and he was determined to get a divorce out of his manly dignity. Kiran approached her, picked up his jacket, and draped it over her body. "Who's there?" Sensing the touch of fabric, Snow cried out in alarm and shot upright. Kiran felt a pang of tenderness for her, but he pretended to scoff. "No need to be so nervous. I'm not going to do anything to you." Snow had initially been glad to see Kiran come home safe and sound, but when she heard these words, she immediately flew off the handle. Remembering how she had forced herself to stay awake and keep waiting out of worry for his safety, she snapped, "Even if you die, it's none of my concern." Chapter 105. "Of course it is. We need to get a divorce, don't we?" Kiran went along with her words. "Scared you'll become a widow?" Kiran teased again. "I'm going to take a shower now. No peeping like a pervert." Whistling, he undressed and sauntered to the bathroom. Snow was beside herself with rage. What did he mean? No peeping like a pervert. She was not into that at all. More infuriatingly, he stripped everything off before her eyes as he headed to the bathroom. He was the one showing his naked body to her. He was the pervert, not her. Tesk, tesk. Right before closing the door, Kiran muttered, "What a pervert you are." You stared at me without blinking at all. Snow went ballistic at once. "Kiran York, you bastard!" She jumped up from the couch and dashed to the bathroom. Without pausing to think, she pressed down on the handle, ready to bust the door down. To her surprise, it swung open. It was not locked. "Ah!" Kiran's head swiveled to her, and he shouted with a grin, "I thought you didn't want to spy on me." Snow quickly shielded her eyes. She had expected Kiran to lock the door and had only intended to vent her frustration by banging on it, only to find it unlocked. Now, she really looked like a pervert who barged in so she could watch him shower. Snow felt like she was about to explode. The next second, she was even more irate. Through the gaps between her fingers, she saw Kiran nonchalantly picking up her toothbrush and mug and proceeding to brush his teeth. "That's my toothbrush and mug," Snow screeched, nearly mad with fury. "Oh, so you were peeking through your fingers," Kiran exclaimed again. "Fine, look all you want. It's not the first time anyway." He added thoughtfully, "We've kissed, which means I'd have caught whatever oral disease you had, so it's okay. I don't mind using your toothbrush and mug." "Well, I mind." Furious, Snow grabbed a fistful of her hair with her right hand. "I bought you toiletries, didn't I?" She glanced at the countertop, only to find that all the toiletries were gone. Just when she was about to search the bathroom, Kiran said calmly, "No need to look for them. I gave them to Rain and her mother." "What?" Snow bristled, not because he had given them away, but more because he did that so he could use her stuff to piss her off. "I told you I was going to keep a sugar baby, didn't I? It only makes sense for me to take care of all her living needs." Kiran replied solemnly. Snow rolled her eyes and fixed him with a glare. "Those $100,000 you spent with my card today was for her too, didn't you?" Kiran nodded honestly. "That's right. I gave the card to Rain and told her to use it as she pleased." "Kiran York, you—" This was the last straw for Snow. She thought Kiran had only been taunting her, so learning that he had actually put his words into action threw her off the deep end. She was Snow Xander, the most distinguished and beautiful young woman in Bayville. How could he make fun of her and turn his nose up at her like this? How humiliating it would be if other people heard about this. "Want a shower together?" Eyeing Snow's near-hysterical demeanor, Kiran suddenly suggested teasingly. "Die, you scumbag." Bang! Snow slammed the door shut and stalked out in a huff, utterly defeated by Kiran. He whistled in the direction of the door. "I prefer my sweet, gentle Rain." Snow stood frozen in the doorway for a moment. Then, she spun on her heel and flipped Kiran off in a very unladylike manner. "Fuck you." Kiran did not respond. Actually, he was doing this to help Snow release her stress. He could tell that she was under great pressure. Even though he planned to divorce her and could not forgive her for duping him, he still felt obliged to protect her and repay the Xander family for their loyalty. As Snow entered the living room, her gaze landed on Kiran's clothes. Chapter 106. Snow remembered the check from earlier, and an idea crystallized in her mind. She scowled in the direction of the bathroom. Stupid jerk, so you gave the card to Rain, huh? In that case, I'll take every last penny from you. Let's see how you're gonna show off. She walked over and started rummaging through Kiran's clothes. The first item she found were the 2 copies of the secret records of Dragon's Mount. Curious, she picked them up and flipped through them but found nothing, so she put them back and continued her search. Soon, she found the $1 billion check from Marshall. Snow's eyes widened in shock and fear. Kiran had just received $500 million by card that day, and now he had obtained another $1 billion check. Had he gone insane? At this rate, he was going to make himself everyone's #1 enemy, and thump! The poison on the secret record of Dragon's Mount was beginning to take effect. Kiran sprinted out of the shower when he heard the sound of something falling. When he saw Snow convulsing on the floor and vomit trickling out of her mouth, he immediately understood what had happened. "You foolish woman!" He raced over to her and started administering treatment with a silver needle. A few minutes later, Snow woke up to find herself in Kiran's arms. Realizing his chest was naked, she screamed, "Pervert!" At the same time, she raised her hands and tried to push him away, to which he responded promptly by letting go. With a thud, Snow fell heavily to the floor. To make things worse, she landed right on her puddle of vomit. Being the clean freak she was, she immediately lost it. "Ah!" She shrieked and scrambled to get up. To her dismay, she slipped and tumbled onto the floor again. This time, she could only lie there miserably. Kiran was also frustrated that she had hurt herself. "You're always asking for trouble, aren't you?" Snow tried to give him a death stare, but tears flowed from her eyes, and her expression was indignant. Kiran snorted. "What a useless woman!" He reached out to gather her into his arms. She did not resist as he carried her. Kiran assessed her condition and concluded that he had no choice but to help her bathe. Snow did not seem to be against it either, though her eyes blazed with fury. This made Kiran uneasy. Thinking something was wrong, he shook her slightly. "You don't have a concussion, do you?" Snow did not answer. "But you didn't hit your head. Have you lost your mind from all that anger?" Kiran asked as he bathed. Snow was still silent. "Hey, are you really okay?" Alarmed, Kiran touched his hand to Snow's head, but there was still no response from her. Kiran panicked. Had she lost consciousness due to intense anger? He hastily felt for her pulse. It was normal. There was no indication of sickness. Kiran was really freaking out now. He patted Snow's cheek. "Honey, are you all right?" He thought Snow might have been overstimulated and attempted to use another term of address to bring her out of her haze. However, she was still unresponsive. Frightened, he embraced her and pulled her close. "You silly woman. Did you have to get so mad? I'll take care of you forever." Thinking of the Xander family's kindness, he blurted out. Snow burst out laughing. Kiran's head went blank. In a flash, he realized he had fallen for her act. "So all that talk about not loving me and wanting to divorce me was a lie," Snow giggled. Kiran was going to be mad. He may be the miracle doctor, but Snow's acting had been too convincing, and she had even allowed him to strip and bathe her without offering the slightest reaction. How could he have suspected anything? "You what? You finally admitted that you're in love with me?" Kiran shook his head frantically. But now I forbid you from being in love with me." Snow cut him off haughtily. Kiran touched his nose. "Then let's get that divorce right away." Snow shook her head. "I forbid you from being in love with me, but I can love your money. I can't believe you made $1.5 billion in a day. One day, I'll use all that money to get myself a bunch of male escorts. That would be absolutely amazing. What a shameless perv." He, on the other hand, was foaming at the mouth. "Ha ha ha!" Kiran's irritation only sent Snow into louder fits of laughter. "You win this time!" Completely defeated, Kiran shot to his feet and flounced out. Snow was delighted. She had been really miserable at first, but when she thought of Kiran galling her again and again, she decided to come up with a way to mess with him. While she had been taken aback and moved by his sense of responsibility, she was, more than anything, pleased to have gotten her revenge. Kiran returned to the living room, fuming at the thought that he had been deceived a second time by Snow. However, when he smelled the stench of vomit in the air, he had no choice but to bite the bullet and clean it up. When Snow emerged from the bathroom half an hour later clean and pristine, The air in the apartment was fresh. She smiled approvingly at Kiran, who was sitting on the couch glumly. Not bad. Do you want a reward? She tugged at her towel, indicating her willingness. Kiran turned his head away and said firmly, "This is the second time you've tricked me. I'm definitely going to divorce you." Annoyance welled up in Snow, but she was quick to suppress it. "That depends on my mood." She opened a drawer and tossed a cell phone to Kiran. "Keep it on 24/7, and don't you dare go Mia on me anymore." "What makes you think you can control me?" Kiran demanded indignantly. "You're now my husband in name, which gives me exclusive rights to control you." Snow beamed at him. "Well, you're my wife in name too, so does that mean I can—" Kiran pretended to leer at Snow's body. "Sure, bring it on, baby!" Snow made to throw herself into his arms. He jumped in horror. "You perv!" He snatched his phone and bolted for his bedroom. "Don't run! Let's do the deed! I'll give you a child!" Snow hollered after him. Kiran was immensely aggravated. He had truly encountered a female pervert. It was the first time Snow felt gratification like this. She finally knew how to rile Kiran up by suggesting they sleep together. Little did she know she was playing with fire, and one day she would become a helpless lamb in bed. As for her acts of seduction just now, they were not completely pretense. After all, her grandpa had urged her, and her kind heart worried for Kiran's safety, so she was actually willing to bear a child for the York family. Although her feelings contradicted each other, she had no regrets. Meanwhile, Kiran entered his room, shut the door right away, and locked it. He exhaled in relief. However, he grew frustrated almost immediately. Damn it! Why should he, a big man, be afraid of her? He flopped onto the bed, holding the phone Snow had just given him, suddenly feeling that she was his biggest enemy. Buzz. Just then, his phone vibrated. He unlocked it and saw that he had an incoming WhatsApp message. It was a photo and... Chapter 107. That was a pretty big size. Was this the allure of black lingerie? Kiran could not stop his eyes from widening. Buzz. At that moment, his phone buzzed again. This time, Kiran almost had a nosebleed. It was a picture of her full body from the head down. Had Snow gone crazy? Was this a game to entice him? Did she give him a phone so she could send him pictures to tempt him to sin? Humph! I'm not that kind of man! Kiran snorted and moved to turn off his phone. It was his phone again. He tapped on it again, and his jaw hit the ground. A woman with the display name, "Set the World on Fire," sent a message asking, "Have you gotten bigger?" What did that mean? What was she saying? Kiran's face turned crimson, then darkened. Was she seriously trying to set him on fire? Was she not scared she would burn herself instead? He hopped out of bed, opened the door, and marched to Snow's room. After her bath, Snow returned to her room and was currently admiring her reflection in the mirror. Coincidentally, she was wearing the same black lingerie in the picture. When Kiran stormed in, his eyes were instantly drawn to her. Kiran's sudden entrance interrupted Snow's self-admiration spell. She screamed and shielded her body with her hands, so embarrassed that she wanted to dig a hole in the ground and bury herself in it. Kiran was peeved. Why was she pretending to be innocent when she had just sent him that message and those pictures? "Why are you screaming? You didn't make a sound when I bathed you, and you definitely weren't shy when you sent those pictures to seduce me." Snow was muddled by Kiran's accusations. After a brief period of shock and agitation, she finally calmed down. He was right. This pig of a man had seen and even touched her body. Wait a second. What did he mean? Seduce him? She shot him an irritated look. "What are you talking about? What do you mean I sent pictures to seduce you? What are you trying to deny now?" Kiran stared at Snow's body. "It's the same design. Besides, you just gave me the phone, and I haven't saved any contacts. Who else would have sent them except you?" Snow was totally befuddled by his words. "What are you babbling about? I don't know what you're talking about. When did I send you pictures? You still don't want to admit it? You think I'm a lowlife just because you're not attractive enough, huh? See for yourself." Kiran took out his phone and opened up the WhatsApp conversation. "It's the exact same color, isn't it? Look at the dirty stuff you said too." Snow was startled when she saw what was on the screen. Her first thought was that she had been secretly photographed. The next second, however, she noticed the mistake. That was not her display name. Hers was Romantic Snow, while this was Set the World on Fire. Set the World on Fire? Snow covered her mouth, her expression flustered and apologetic. What? Are you embarrassed by your outrageous behavior? Kiran snickered. Give me the phone! Without attempting to explain, Snow shot out a hand to seize the phone. Kiran dodged easily and put the phone away. Nope, I'm going to keep this as evidence that you tried to seduce me. Snow was close to tears. The pictures were from none other than Serena. She had forgotten to log out of the account she had used to chat with her besties before giving the phone to Kiran. As for the lingerie she was wearing, she had bought matching sets with Serena earlier that evening. Serena had called her after Kiran had left her seething on her own, and she had agreed to go shopping together. Just now, Serena had slipped on the lingerie and sent Snow pictures to show off, only to end up sending them to Kiran. What a dreadful misunderstanding. Red-faced and mortified, Snow looked at Kiran and tried to negotiate with him. How about you give it back to me and I'll buy you a new phone tomorrow? Chapter 108. You want to destroy the evidence? Don't even think about it. Kiran immediately clutched the phone tighter, refusing to let her have it. Snow felt like tearing out her hair. In the end, she said helplessly, I didn't send you those pictures. My bestie intended to send them to me, but I forgot to log out of my account before giving you the phone. The truth was, Kiran had discovered something was off the moment he entered the room. Although the woman in the photos looked like Snow, the bed behind her was different, and the sheets and covers were different too. However, he could not let Snow have the phone. This was valuable evidence. With this in his arsenal, she would have to think twice before crossing him. When he thought about the possibility of their divorce falling through and how he had been tricked for the second time that day, he was even more determined not to give the phone up. Don't lie to me. I'm not that easily fooled. With that, Kiran spun on his heel. Snow wiped the sweat from her forehead, feeling helpless and apologetic towards Serena. Bah! Kiran's phone vibrated again. Snow felt her whole body turn to ice. Was Serena still sending him messages? Instead of chasing after him, she fumbled for her phone and called Serena. Kiran returned to his room. Serena answered the call, chuckling. Snow, why didn't you reply? I wanted to compare my size with a married woman to see if you could beat me. First. Stop it! Blushing, Snow cut her off loudly. What's wrong? Sensing something was wrong, Serena thought to herself. Did Kiran tell her about my attempts to seduce him? Please stop sending messages to that account. Snow lowered her voice, sounding remorseful. The truth dawned on Serena at once, and she burst out laughing. Don't tell me your husband saw them? Snow felt as if she had committed a crime and was overwhelmed with guilt. In the end, she admitted truthfully. Yeah, I gave him the phone so he could stop going Mia on me, but... She did not finish, but what she meant to say was obvious. No, my innocence. Serena struggled to contain her mirth as she wailed. If she had known Kiran was the recipient, she would have stripped herself naked. Unaware of Serena's thoughts, Snow continued to apologize. I'm so sorry. I can't live on like this. Afraid that she would laugh out loud, Serena quickly cut the call. Snow pulled a handful of her hair in frustration. Tossing her phone aside, she raced to Kiran's room. Kiran had just set his phone down and was getting ready to sleep when the screen flashed with an incoming video call. Eyeing the display name, he accepted the call without hesitation. The next second, he was greeted by an obscene sight. Have you lost your mind? Kiran roared and hung up right away. At that very moment, Snow burst through the door. Thinking Kiran was yelling at her, she flared up. Give me back the phone. Ugh, this is driving me nuts. She dived forward to snatch the device. Irritated, Kiran lobbed it in her direction. Get out! Get out! Stop seducing me! I'm not that desperate. Relieved to have finally recovered the phone, Snow turned and ran out. However, Kiran's gaze grew sharp. Despite the obscenity of the image just now, he recognized Serena's black nails at a glance. That woman was seducing him on purpose. His lips curled into a perfect smile. If there's anyone in Bayville who has a death wish, I'll grant it. With that, he turned in for the night. In the other room, Snow frantically erased all information on the phone. Meanwhile, in the Fableman family's residence, Zenith and Helena were gazing sorrowfully at their son's portrait in the funeral hall. Eventually, Zenith stamped his foot fiercely. "Kiran York, I'll make you suffer like you've never suffered before." He fished out his phone and made a call. Chapter 109. "Hello, Mr. Zenith?" A man's polite but raspy voice came from the other end. "What happened to you, Mr. Silas?" Zenith asked in a low voice. Silas Stone's tone grew bitter. "Someone on Rainfrost's side took revenge on my son today. That person had the audacity to tell me to resign as vice principal and get out of Bayville University tomorrow." "Was it Kiran York?" Zenith blurted out. "You know him?" Silas was surprised. "Oh, more than that, I will never forget him." "Why?" "He killed my son," Zenith snarled, fighting to keep his grief from engulfing him. "What?" Silas glanced at his dejected son beside him, suddenly feeling lucky that he was at least still alive. "I called to ask you to get Rainfrost expelled tomorrow. After that, I want her dead." Zenith's voice was full of hatred. Silas's mind went blank, and for a moment he forgot to respond. "I would kill that woman myself if not for our years of friendship, but you could potentially lose your job." "Do you understand?" Zenith reminded him coldly. I do," Silas answered repeatedly, then asked tentatively, "Can I get rid of Kiran York too?" "Oh, I want him dead more than anyone else." "If you can make it happen, I'll join you," Zenith replied icily. "All right, I'll expel the girl tomorrow and help you carry out your plan afterward. Thank you for always looking out for me, Mr. Zenith." Silas thanked him earnestly. Click! Zenith ended the call and turned to one of the bodyguards beside him. "I don't care how much it costs. Find someone who can stage a car crash and kill Rainfrost tomorrow, and then when Kiran York becomes unhinged." He made a throat-slitting gesture. The bodyguard nodded and left to execute the order. Zenith smiled cruelly. He could not care less about Silas's problems. His purpose was simple: to make Silas expel Rain and get her killed in a car crash while she was distracted with dismay. Kiran would then hear the news and lose his sanity. He would even go to Silas for vengeance, which would provide Zenith with the perfect opportunity to take him out. It was foolproof. As for Silas, he did not care if he lived or died. He glanced at his son's portrait. "Rest in peace, my boy. I'll make sure to give Kiran York and his allies a brutal death." He gazed up at the pitch-black night sky. Kiran York, a hot-headed brute like you can never take on the three big families. "You can burn in hell!" Kiran had no idea that Zenith was already maniacally plotting a series of traps to exact his revenge. With Zenith's assurance, a confident Silas immediately informed his secretary to summon Rain to school the following day. Rain received the call in the middle of the night. The next day, Kiran woke up early and headed to Margaret's place. Margaret was cleaning up the house. When she saw Kiran, she assumed he was looking for Rain and said, "Rain's not here." She left for work early. Kiran figured that Rain had left early to catch the bus. He shook his head, amazed by her seriousness. On second thought, he realized it would be useful to get Snow's Ferrari repaired. The three of them would have a car. "What's wrong, Kiran?" Margaret mistook Kiran's silence for disappointment that Rain was not around. "Mom, you don't have to do the cleaning anymore. I'll hire a domestic helper for you." Kiran changed the subject. "I worked as a domestic helper before, and let me tell you, it's a job that requires conscience. I don't need a helper. Besides, I'm not ready to sit around and let you two take care of me." Margaret started rambling. Remembering that Snow was about to wake up soon, Kiran said, "Mom, I have to go now. Take care of yourself." With that, he turned and left. Margaret supposed he was leaving for work, so she did not try to keep him. When Kiran returned to Snow's apartment, she was just coming out of her room. She rolled her eyes and ignored him. "Give me some cash." Kiran stretched a hand out to her. "I don't have any." Snow bristled at the thought of him using her card to spend money on Rain, his sugar baby. Kiran raised a brow. "Fine." Snow was startled. Since when was this jerk so easygoing? In that case, she would not waste her anger on him. After getting dressed, they went downstairs and headed to the office by car. Chapter 110. In the car, Snow handed Kiran the phone and instructed him to keep it on 24/7. "If you love me, just say so. You deny it, but you want to monitor me," Kiran muttered. "You." In the end, Snow bit her tongue and chanted to herself, "Don't ruin your whole day by getting angry in the morning." Kiran pulled up in front of the company building. The security guard at the entrance opened the gates and bowed to them respectfully. However, Kiran did not move the car from the entrance. Snow shot Kiran a perplexed look. Before she could speak, Kiran called out to the security guard, "Do you have cash? Lend me another $100. The guard was stunned. He had lent Kiran $100 yesterday because he thought Kiran had forgotten to bring his wallet. Why was he borrowing money again today? He was the CEO's husband. The CEO was right there in the car. Why was he borrowing money from him? The employees passing by were also bewildered to hear this. One by one, they stopped and stared. Snow was flabbergasted. Why would Kiran borrow money from a security guard and not her, the CEO? It was far more humiliating than being slapped in the face with a shoe. The corners of Kiran's lips curved up, and he opened his mouth to speak. Snow hastily clamped a hand over his mouth and hissed in his ear, "If you utter a single word of nonsense, I will jump off this building and die right before your eyes." Kiran's eyes bulged. Was this girl for real? She was mad with rage after he publicly teased her for being dissatisfied the previous morning, which then led to the employee yelling for him to take Viagra. If he riled her up again today, she might end up doing something crazy. Feigning indignance, Kiran nodded, started the car, and drove into the building. Snow heaved a long sigh of relief. She was completely at a loss for how to deal with Kiran. This jerk was always doing the most unthinkable things. After getting out of the car, she strutted for the elevator in a huff. Kiran strolled leisurely into the lobby. When the receptionist spotted Kiran, her eyes lit up like stars, and she winked at him, hoping he would notice her. Snow caught sight of it from the corner of her eye and cursed Kiran inwardly for being a man-whore. She was dumbfounded when he approached the receptionist as if he had been charmed by her wink. The woman blushed in excitement. Snow's head spun. He wasn't trying to borrow money from the receptionist, was he? Perturbed by the thought, she rapidly exited the elevator, teetered toward him in her high heels, and grabbed 2 stacks of cash from her purse. "Here, take this." Kiran almost burst into laughter as he took the money unceremoniously and looked at the receptionist. Is Rain here already? Snow. She had fallen for his trickery. It turned out he meant to ask about Rain. She had just given him money to treat his sugar baby. The receptionist nodded vacantly, then shook her head and said, "She asked me to inform Ms. Xander that she needed to deal with some stuff at school and will be back soon." "Got it." Kiran swiveled around and smiled at Snow. "I'm heading to Bayville University." Snow felt that she was about to explode. How close exactly was this jerk to Rain? The receptionist, on the other hand, gazed at Kiran in admiration. He was probably the only man badass enough to keep a sugar baby right under his wife's nose. She wished fervently that she could become one of them too. Ignoring Snow's confusion and anger, Kiran got into the car and drove off. He could not shake off the feeling that something was wrong. Besides, he intended to visit the Schuyler Library today. When passing through the gates, he tossed a stack of money to the security guard. Consider the extra amount as interest. The guard had not expected to be paid back $10,000 for a $100 debt. He stared after Kiran's car, emotional tears welling up in his eyes. What a man Mr. Kiran was! He was determined to serve him for the rest of his life. He would gladly be his minion. Little did Kiran know the guard would risk his life to protect the Xander Corporation that night because of this $10,000. Meanwhile, in Silas's office in Bayville University, "Rain Frost, you're expelled."